never mentioned that there were men as dark as this. Wow, look at that nose. He's just like a pig. He's a monster! Hi!
In today's episode, I'm joined by Chris. You are a blogger who's living in South Korea. I wanted to thank you for joining me today, so thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
And I wanted to start off by asking, how'd you end up in South Korea?
Well, I've been studying Korean language and culture for over 15 years now. So I started back in the States. I've been to Korea before, and right now I'm here for 3 months looking around, seeing if this is where I want to move to, and so far it's looking good. So just enjoying my time in Korea and soaking in more of the culture and getting a better understanding for how things go.
Okay. What are some of the best things about the country?
Definitely, it's a safe country. There's not a lot of guns, so when you walk around, you feel safe. I would feel safe with my sisters coming to live here as well. Plenty of food. Once you get accepted by the culture, things runs pretty smoothly. It's just that part of getting accepted by the culture becomes very difficult for a lot of people, and that's where you start getting into a lot of issues, especially for people coming from the States.
And how much of an issue is, I guess, racism in the country?
It can be a very big issue. Korea is a homogenous society, which means that 97% of the people living in Korea are considered to be Korean. So it's even though you have a lot of military population here and you have more businesses coming from other countries, it's still not usual for people to see a non-Korean walking around, let alone in my case, a 6'4" African American male walking around on the streets.
Um, how much do you think the media plays into that, I guess, race issue?
It's been an issue going back to the 50s. So, as a brief synopsis, basically before 1950, when the Korean War started, there weren't a lot of non-Asians that came to Korea.
Mhm.
And of course, during that time period, you had more and more people from the United States, from England that were coming over. And so you would have children that would shout out, Migukin, Migukin, meaning American, or Waygookin, Waygookin, which means foreigner. So at that time period, there were a lot of African American males marrying Korean females. But then you start hearing negative stories, especially in the media, about, well, Black people do this, they're bad people, they don't take care of women. So it was used kind of as a propaganda ploy to prevent marriages between Korean women and Black men specifically. But it snowballed from there. And even now, when talking to some people who are teaching in schools, it's still an issue for elementary school teachers where they are viewed as not being as good of a teacher if they are Black, or there's stories such as Black people grow a tail at night. And so you have to be careful about Black people. That's told to little kids.
Oh, like they go a tail like that, like a monkey.
Like, yeah, literally that. The story that I heard from one teacher is she noticed one of her students were crying at the end of class. And so she went to see, well, what's going on? And the little girl told her, teacher, I like you, but because you're Black, your tail's going to come out at night, and I hope people don't bother you or hit you for that.
Okay.
So that's apparently a story that even went back to Nazi Germany, is what I'm finding, where people said Black people had tails and you need to be careful and separate them from other people.
Wow. Moving on to the next subject because yeah. Going to the issue of dating. Do you think that dating Korean women is could be an issue for Black men in the country?
It definitely can. Right now, there's a big issue where a lot of Black men aren't even allowed in nightclubs. So you have that issue. You also have an issue where people here care a lot about what other people think. So there's pressure from the family if they see their daughter dating a Black man. Well, you need to break up with him. Or friends might try to persuade Korean women, you don't want to date a black man because this might happen or that might happen.
So I actually looked at one of your articles titled "Do Korean People Hate Black People?" And one of the things you mentioned about dating was that younger Koreans are open to dating black and Latinos. It's like the younger generation is more open to it. Would you agree with that?
Yes, definitely. I think for the younger generation, they're more influenced by what they've seen on the internet as far as hip hop or urban fashion, or for some of them, they've actually gone to school abroad. So they've been around more Black people, more Latino people, whereas the older generation, for a lot of them, they haven't traveled as much or as far. So the only thing they know about Black or Latino culture is basically what's shown in movies. And unfortunately, that isn't an accurate or positive portrayal of either culture.
Okay. And you also said in that article that for some South Koreans who had married a black man, that black husband, and I'm paraphrasing, the black husband enjoyed Korean food and culture, that their husband was willing to move back to South Korea, and the Korean woman was able to keep her identity. And most importantly, like she felt like a princess every day. Do you remember that, or is that something that you still see in South Korea when they do date a black man? Yeah.
Yeah. So in that particular case, that was a Korean woman who I met in the States and got to interview. She had actually left her church because the pastor's wife told her that since she had married a black man, that she was dirty in God's eyes and that God would never love her. And that since her kids were half black, they could never be forgiven for their sins.
Mm.
And so that sometimes is a common story for Korean women who date and marry black men, because some of them, unfortunately, have been viewed kind of like prostitutes for being with the black man.
Mm-hmm.
But from the stories that I've observed and the people that I've been able to interview personally, the ones who were married to black men, those Korean women kept their identity more. They did have husbands who are more willing to move back to Korea, and they typically enjoyed a better marriage than Korean women who married a foreigner but who wasn't black.
Okay. I bring that up because I wanted to ask if you've seen South Korean women who are interested in black men. Have you seen them being willing to move to where that black man lived or learn the culture of that black man?
Definitely. You have some Korean women who do not prefer life in Korea and they are open to moving abroad. So I've seen some stories where some have moved to Africa, others they've married a black man who's in the military, and they're very open to coming to the US. Most of the time, the women are very respectful of the culture. The biggest issue that I've seen is sometimes when Korean women are overly into like hip hop culture, they might portray themselves almost like a caricature of what they think black culture is. And so that ends up being an issue sometimes. But usually, the women who are just being themselves, they are very respectful by nature. So it's easier for them to come to the US, get accepted by the family, and just blend in.
Okay. Another question in that subject. Do you think that it may be necessary for a black guy who wants to date a South Korean woman to give up some of his identity in order to date her, or why not?
I would say you never give up your identity, just because if you don't love you for you, nobody else is going to love you for you.
Mm-hmm.
And the true way to get acceptance is to be yourself, but you do need to adapt to learn more of the culture and the language. That's the biggest issue that I've seen, and that's the biggest issue that's pointed out to me when I talk to other Koreans as to why a lot of foreigners are not accepted. And they say it's because people don't learn the culture, they don't learn the language, and they're not respectful.
Okay.
So Koreans in general, they don't mind you being yourself because there's a lot of similarities just because we're all human. But when you don't learn more and you don't show proper respect, that's where you have an issue, and that's where those walls start to come up.
Okay. In that article, you also mentioned that Korean Americans were some of the most racist people that you've met. How have like your experiences either socially or romantically differed between South Koreans and Korean Americans?
The thing that I've noticed, and I've talked to a few of my friends who've been here in Korea and in the States, is that when you are here in Korea, you don't have to prove you're Korean. You're just a Korean person. But when we're around Korean Americans in the States, there's almost this pressure of, I need to prove that I'm a real Korean. I need to prove that I'm a good Korean. And so sometimes we've had experiences where we are around our friends who are Korean American, and if nobody else is there, it's perfectly fine. But when other Koreans start showing up, that's where they start to be shunful, or sometimes they don't want to be seen with non Koreans. So you have that mentality. You have others who just openly are opposed from the jump. So I've had even situations where my friends who are Korean American have been told by other Korean Americans, look, you can hang with us, but don't bring that black guy around because we don't want that black guy anywhere near us.
Okay. So,
Because in part that's due to just a fear that if a black man's coming around, he's there just to take the women.
yeah.
So the last thing that an insecure person would want is someone that they view as a threat to them getting what they want.
So it's a matter of, I guess, Korean Americans, like they want to be able to, they have something to prove, I guess, relative to being a South Korean in terms of their identity.
Yeah, the thing that's been told to me by some Korean Americans is there's this feeling that if you are in Korea, it can be a little more difficult to make it and be successful, but anybody can make it in America. So the feeling is if you are a Korean, you come to America and you don't go to a good college, you don't have a good job, you don't have a fancy car, you don't do all these things that quote unquote a good Korean should do, then there's something wrong with you. And of course, that's not everyone who feels that way, but just observing certain people from multiple areas of the United States, that seems to be a common thread as to what people feel they need to be doing as a Korean American to quote unquote look successful, especially when Koreans from Korea come over.
Okay. I wanted to talk about one more article. It's titled "Why Do Some Korean Women Hide Dating a Black Man?" that you wrote. You mentioned obviously that Korean women had to hide dating a black man, and you mentioned stories about some of the issues that some Korean women in South Korea have to go through. But when it comes to hiding the fact that they're dating a black man, can you elaborate on this?
So, for the stories that I referenced in that article, there were some Korean women who mentioned they had dated their now husband, for maybe a year or two, but they felt like they couldn't tell their parents about it. So maybe one parent knew because they're on the phone and they're speaking in English. So obviously, you're dating somebody and this person is not Korean. You're speaking English to them. But for many who are in that situation, they said they've seen their parents' reaction to them having black friends, or they've seen what other people have gone through, and they just felt nervous in the beginning because here's somebody that they like, but the perception is, well, what are people going to think? What is our family going to think? I want pure Korean grandchildren.
Mm-hmm.
So for a number of reasons, depending upon the situation, a woman may feel like, yes, I'm in this relationship. Yes, I'm in love. But for me, I need to hide this right now and try to find the right time to say, hey, by the way, my boyfriend is black. Or some where the parents knew it, they said, you know what? If you're having a party, you can bring him, but only as your friend. You can't identify him as your boyfriend. So when you see stuff like that, you start to understand more why some women in the beginning, it's not that they're not proud of their boyfriend, it's just because of things that either they've gone through or their friends have gone through, they feel like they need to hide that fact that they're dating someone who's black.
And have you heard black men confirm this as well? Have you heard their side of the story?
Yeah, I've heard where they wanted to be open about their relationship or they wanted to meet the parents because here in Korea, it's especially important if you're thinking about marriage that the parents approve. And that goes back to part of why parents were told negative things about Black people, so that parents would not approve relationships between Black men, Korean women, or Korean men, Black women.
Mm-hmm.
So when these men wanted to just basically be a man, go say hi to the parents, say, hey, I'm interested in your daughter, I'm looking to marry her. They said that they've been told that, look, you need to not see the parents right now, or that they've been told, you're not my daughter's boyfriend, you're just her friend. And they've been shunned at the beginning. But usually in those circumstances, once the marriage actually happens and the parents get to see the personality, then that ice kind of melts. And then over time, they start to become accepted for being a good person.
We talked about the negative stereotypes of Black people, how that plays a role, but how does skin tone play a role in all this?
It can be a very big factor, just because for some people they've been taught, the darker the person, the scarier they are. And I remember watching one video where a woman who's in America now, but she met her husband here in Korea. He's from Africa and he has the dark complexion like I do. So when she showed her mother a picture of him, she started crying. And she said that she was scared of him because of having darker skin.
Hmm.
So there's already a stigma that some people have where they equate darker skin to more poverty, whether it's an Asian person or an African person. But sometimes that fear of that menacing Black man that they see in movies or in videos, that can play a role in the mindset as well.
Okay. And what would you say, like, to, I guess, break these stereotypes? Like, what advice would you have for Black men who want to date South Koreans, but they feel as though they're not desirable?
I would say you definitely are desirable. If you come to Korea, you will definitely find that out when you go out and talk to people, or even if you're around Korean Americans a lot. Once people see that you respect their language and their culture, that's when you start to get adopted. And that's when, once your personality shows, people will actually start to match you up. So it's not that the entire culture is going to be racist, the entire culture is going to be against you. It's almost like a vetting out process to see how serious that you are. So definitely be yourself, but be respectful, learn the language. One of the things that Korean women and Asian women in particular say is they don't like it when a man says, well, I'm into Asian women. Then it looks like you have some type of fetish. Whereas if you're actually into a culture and you love that culture, then it becomes easier to accept you and your personality shines more. So don't make it about you just want someone because they're Asian or because they're from this country or that country. Make it about your personality. Let that shine. Be respectful, learn the language, and just let things naturally happen, because over time, as people see that, they'll gain your trust and then they'll start opening doors for you.
Okay. That was going to be my last question, but you brought something else up, so I wanted to ask one more. Have you seen those Asian women that complain about, men being interested in because they're Asian? Have you seen those women with like a dating preference of their own, particularly for white? Or do you see them having a dating preference at all?
For a lot of those women, when I talk to them, they're open to any man who's willing to love them. I think a lot of times the media makes this portrayal of the model minority myth. So with the model minority myth, they're only going to show really attractive Asian women as being with white men or wanting to be white.
Mm-hmm.
But the truth is, for Asian women, they're just women. They want to be approached as a woman. They want to be loved by someone who is a good man, who's going to take care of them and treat them right. So they're open to a Black guy as much as they are any guy. It's just when you say things about, well, I like Asian this, I like Asian that, then the antenna comes up like, okay, something's not right with this guy, and let me back off or let me leave him alone. Whereas if you are into her culture and you show respect, then it's easier for that ball to start rolling. And then you just approach her like you would any other woman. And then before you know it, you're dating.
Okay. So yeah, those were all my questions. I wanted to thank you for your time. If you had anything else to add, go ahead. Otherwise, thank you.
No, no problem. Thank you. If you want to follow me, I'm pretty much the Waygookin at everything on social media. Waygookinway.com is my blog site where I talk about my experiences as an African American male in Korean/Korean American culture. And the biggest thing that I would say, don't always believe everything that the media says because it's not all true. You got to learn to live life yourself, go out, have your own experiences. Once you do that, you'll find that you'll have doors that you thought were up that become open, and walls that you thought were there, they start to become broken down, and you'll end up having the time of your life.